Hello, everybody. Welcome to this courageous conversation, my third YouTube live. Hi, Christina. I've also got live going on Facebook, so this should be interesting. I'd love to know who is here. I see Christina on Facebook. Who's joining me on YouTube? I'd love to be able to say hi to you. So, for those on YouTube, hi Jazz, can you hear me okay? Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. So, hi Yvette. Great. All right. So I am on my public profile page on Facebook Live, as well as YouTube Live right now. So please feel free to join me in either place, but YouTube is where I am most focused and where I can more easily see comments and questions. So I wanted to do this video today because I really wanted to have a conversation with you about a really important part of healing that can feel incredibly scary. And as is very common, when something feels really scary, we tend to avoid it. Makes perfect sense, right? However, when it comes to healing from abuse, there's a lot that feels really scary that is important in being able to heal. So, hi, Jamie. Hi, Kelly. So I wanted to be able to talk a little bit about this, and this came up because I was having a conversation with somebody this week around doing this healing work, doing individual work, and the different pieces that are important in order to be able to heal, kind of generally, but more specifically around abuse. And one of the things that came up is the importance of a group experience in healing. And part of what we talked about is that she shared her fears, but I also shared my personal experience with group. I shared my experience and as a facilitator with group as well. And part of what came up, hi Sean, part of what came up was the last time that I launched my group online program called Journey to Wholeness. And so I shared a little bit about some of the things that came up in that, which I'll share with you in a moment as well. But I want to talk a little bit about why I think having a group experience with other survivors is so important to this process. Individual work is really important for a lot of reasons. And there's stuff that you can get in individual work that you can't get in any other way. So it plays a really important role. Group is really important because there are things that you can experience in a group setting that are impossible to experience in an individual setting. It's also impossible to experience when you're just among a group of friends. And what you gain from a group experience is, I think, kind of necessary in many ways because you get the experience of really allowing yourself to be fully seen by people who understand, and you have a reasonable level of confidence. And I'm saying reasonable for a reason, but you have a reasonable level of confidence that they are going to have similar feelings, similar fears, and somewhat similar experiences. And you're not paying them. And for anybody who has worked with a therapist, maybe not 100% of people, but a really common thing that happens when you're paying somebody as a counselor, therapist, coach, whatever it is, and they share things with you or they tell you like the things that they see in you or that it wasn't your fault or whatever it is, it's so easy for that part of you in the back of your mind, and sometimes it's very much at the forefront of your mind, but it's so easy to discount what that person is saying to you by saying to yourself, well, I'm paying them, or they're supposed to say those things, um, or something along that line. But it's a really easy thing to be able to discount. When you're with a group of peers, you can't use that as an excuse. Yeah, you might come up with some other things to say, but you can't use that as an excuse. So that's one piece of it. But beyond that, it really is about the experience of being with other people who get it. And this is true for in-person groups, which I led when I had my private practice, I led groups for survivors that were really, really powerful, really powerful. And then I've also done online groups, first with, actually, I did a book club thing, a book group several years ago, which was also really powerful. But since then, I have a group course that I do. So it could be online, but that was incredibly powerful. And then also, a retreat experience is also a group experience, but just really intensive, really deep in a short period of time. And those are all different ways of doing group experiences, and they all can be really, really beneficial. And if any of you watching have done any type of group experience and you found it helpful, I'd love for you to share in the comments, just like, yeah, it was helpful, or even acknowledging fear that was there. I remember years ago when I led my in-person groups in private practice, somebody shared this publicly at some point, but she was so nervous thinking about coming into that group room that very first night that she sat out in her car for quite a while before group started and thought about leaving several times because she was so uncertain. She didn't know what to expect. She couldn't imagine sharing with strangers. She was nauseous. She really thought many times about turning around and going home, but she didn't. She stayed and she came into the group that very first night and ended up recognizing and sharing that it was one of the best decisions she had ever made. Even on that very first night, she felt like it was one of the best decisions she had ever made. So the fear that people have, and I get it because I had the same fear before I started my first group, before I participated in the first group that I did. It was really scary. I couldn't imagine sharing with people. I thought for sure that nobody would understand me, that everybody else's experiences would be so different than mine, and I wouldn't belong. And after that very first night, leaving there and actually saying, I believe I said it out loud to myself, why isn't anybody talking about this? If people would just talk about this, none of us, meaning the people that I just met in group, none of us would have to struggle in the way that we have. And I didn't realize it at the time, and I actually just realized it in the last year or so. But that, leaving that group and saying that out loud that night, planted the seed for everything that I've done in this work, in creating this YouTube channel, in connecting with everybody on Facebook, in doing my work online, it's all been about talking and sharing so that people know they're not alone. And one of the best ways to know that you're not alone is to experience groups for survivors of abuse. And part of the reason that I'm sharing this with you, as I said, this came up in a conversation with somebody, and I was telling her about Journey to Wholeness is the course that I have online, and I'm going to be releasing it again soon. And she said, no, I don't think that I could do a group because it's a standalone course that people can do on their own, but I really want to do it as a group again. And she wasn't sure about that. So I ended up sharing with her. So this group course I ran twice. And I'm sharing this with you because you'll probably see yourself in this a little bit. And I want you to hear the experience of others so that hopefully you can begin to recognize that even though you might have some of the same fears, rebuttals, uneasiness that so many other people have, kind of where they ended up. So the first time that I ran Journey to Wholeness, which at the time was Journey to Understanding, I had a small group of people and I ran it as an online group. So the intention was that we would come together, we would have a weekly group meeting, and I would also do weekly live or weekly Q&As. I actually didn't anticipate that they would be live at the time. So, and then we had a Facebook group. And so there was a lot of group stuff kind of happening in that space, which I knew would be beneficial. But it was a fairly small group, which ended up being a beautiful experience. And there might even be somebody watching now who joined me on that first round. Hi, Joanne. Yeah, free groups can be hard to come by. But it was a small group. But in part because it was a small group, they really came together so beautifully that first time in the Facebook group. And then when I ended up doing the Facebook Live Q&A every week, which was really powerful. Even though I only had sometimes one or two people pop on the actual live, they could share their questions ahead of time and I answered them. And I ended up hearing from people that, and in fact, I would say more than half of the people, that the Q&A was equally, if not more so, helpful than the other stuff that was happening, like the other material and stuff like that. So it was such a powerful bonding and growth experience that we ended up coming together for a retreat at the end of it. Because they did come together, because they did share, because they did build those bonds and those relationships, and they felt really eager to come together and retreat. And so we did. The second time I ran the group, I ran it more as a standalone course without the group part of it. But when I saw that most of the people, or a lot of the people who were joining the group also were in our Facebook closed group, I decided to go ahead and put together a Facebook group for those people as well. And we also had, I don't remember how many live calls we had, but we ended up having a few live calls that were also Q&A. And it was a smaller group that came together in the live calls, which is to be expected. But what ended up happening is that, and we ended up having kind of a marathon live call in one of them because I was getting a lot of really, really great feedback from them because somebody had asked. Again, they were kind of doing it on their own. I wasn't really participating much with them in the experience. They weren't necessarily connecting a lot in the Facebook group themselves, which is perfectly okay. But when we came together live, somebody had said, "So what's next? Like, I feel like I need more. What's next?" And so I asked for feedback. And what ended up happening is that, if I remember correctly, everybody on the call, there might have been a person maybe that didn't kind of feel the same way, but virtually everyone on this live call ended up saying, now that they had had the experience of having some live group calls, they did want more of that. But in the beginning, when they first signed up for it, they didn't want that. And some even said, if that had been a part of it, if the live group experience part would have been kind of a part of the process from the beginning, that they may not have signed up for it. But because they got to experience those live calls, they were kind of I think, a bonus aspect of the course. But because they had experienced the live calls without any pressure to join, without any pressure to participate or anything, they ended up wanting the live group piece of it. They wanted more of that. And I'm sharing that with you again because even though you may feel like, yeah, I think a group sounds nice, but I don't know if I could ever do that. I don't really want to share with total strangers. I don't want to, I feel like I wouldn't belong, that my story would not matter or would be different. Or what if I don't get along with the people, or whatever it is that you might say to yourself, that in this group of people, whatever the fear was initially, by the end, or not even by the end, but hi Marley, but by the end, they wanted more. So even though in the beginning of something, it may feel like, no, 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 I can't do that. And I've heard people say the same thing for my retreats. Like, no, I could never do that. I could never go away and share a home with strangers and open up in such a profound way. So even though you have that fear, what you end up experiencing when you allow yourself to push through the fear and be in that really vulnerable space and take the risk, what comes out of that is something that is incredibly powerful and beautiful. But if you let the fear keep you from doing it, you miss out on such an important piece. And if there's anybody, I don't know who's watching right now, but if there's anybody here who has experienced a group with me, whether it was an online group, an in-person group, a retreat, the book group even, if you're comfortable sharing, I would love for you to share like what some of your fears might have been, and how it ended up feeling, whether it was after the first time or at the end of it, like really being able to recognize either that you wanted more, that that what you ended up experiencing wasn't something that you thought you could experience because you thought that maybe you wouldn't have belonged, or that your experience didn't matter, or that you wouldn't be able to open up. That's another thing that I hear from people quite often is, I don't think that I could share. And so then they think, why bother? And then people are going to not want me to be there because if I'm not sharing, then they're going to feel uncomfortable. But what happens is that once you get to experience the safety, once you get to hear other people sharing, it changes how you feel about being there. And part of the reason that, again, that I wanted to talk about this, it was about the conversation that I had earlier this week, But I am going to be, or at least my intention is to open up Journey to Wholeness again this year. And this time around, I will probably have it as a standalone thing as well, but I really want to be able to offer it as a group experience in some aspect. And but in order for it to be beneficial as a group experience, there have to be enough people for it to be a group. um, and I've heard from so many people that they would like that, but they just don't know if they can. And so, if you've thought about it, share with me here. Let me know that you're interested. And when I release it, and I don't have the dates for that yet, but when I release it, I am happy to get on a call with you, and I'll probably do another live. But I'm happy to talk with you about your concerns, because I really want you to be able to experience. Really, it's such a profound experience to be a part of a group, and it's profound to experience, and it is such an important part of your healing journey. Um, so I am going to be releasing that again, and I would love to have you participate in that. And if you've got questions, you can share them here. And if I don't get to them in the live, I'll come back and answer them. So I don't have dates for that yet, but I am planning to do that. I also, when I sent out an email about the retreat for this year, I did get a couple people, or a person at least, who was really like, yeah, I really want to do this. I got a couple of people that were like, well, I don't think I could really do it. I don't think I can afford it. I don't think I could, really show up and participate, whatever. And I think for most people, in fact, I think for everybody who has come to a retreat, especially the first time, but even a second time potentially, it's incredibly scary. Really, coming in and sharing a home with other survivors that you've never met in person and maybe never met before coming together in the Facebook group for the retreat. I'm not exaggerating this. It really is, aside from any abuse experiences or anything, will be probably the most terrifying thing that you do. Truly. Because there's so much vulnerability in that. But in part, it's because of the vulnerability that makes it such a healing experience. And that is true for a group as well, even a group that you do in your own community. So I'm not just talking about, please do a group with me. That's not what this is about. Of course, if you're interested in doing the group with me, then I welcome you. I would love to have you. But even finding a group in your own community, just allowing yourself to experience that. So let me take a moment here and see if I can catch up on some questions here. Jess, thank you. So Jess says, it was very helpful and difficult. Lisa, it was helpful to open up some in a safe space. Thank you both for sharing. It's a really scary thing to do. That very first group that I went, or actually it was the only group that I went to for me personally in my own healing, I had no idea what to expect, which that by itself makes it incredibly scary. I thought for sure that I would be the oddball, that I would be the different one there in some way or another. But even though I didn't share much that first night, I really don't think that I shared much at all that first night, because this was very early in my healing. When I left there was so much that shifted for me. Not only did it plant the seed for everything that came after that in my work and my own healing, but the sense of being crazy. Like, I truly believe that there was something deeply wrong with me. And when I left that group that first night, I still thought there was something wrong with me. I will be very honest about that. I definitely thought there was still something wrong with me, but I didn't think that it was nearly as much. I didn't think there was nearly as much wrong with me after that first night because I saw that other people thought the same things were wrong with them, that they struggled in a lot of the same ways, in some different ways. So I knew that it wasn't just me. And if it wasn't just me, then maybe I really wasn't as messed up as I thought. And I want that for all of you. And it really is such an important piece of this healing experience. Group is powerful. Hi, Candace. I have not yet mentioned the Mother Wound group, but I will do that. Thank you, Barbara, for sharing that. Barbara says, the online group and retreat was an amazingly healing experience, even though I was fearful at the start. Yeah, it's incredibly kind of overwhelming. People will often think, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Why did I agree to this? And you'll come up with all kinds of reasons why it's really not a good idea. But that's the whole self-protective thing. Vulnerability doesn't feel good. Vulnerability feels like you're on the verge of jumping off off of a cliff into something that you have into total darkness. You have no idea what is below. That's what vulnerability feels like. So of course, just a rational instinct would be, but of course your self-protective instinct is no, absolutely not, no way, never, not in a million years, which makes sense. But in order to heal, in order to love, in order to be in a loving relationship, we have to be able to get to a place where we can recognize that even though we may not know what is beyond that cliff, recognizing that you've had some experiences that can show you that sometimes what's beyond that cliff is something beautiful and soft and welcoming and safe. Not always. I'm not going to pretend that jumping off the cliff always ends in something beautiful and healing. Sometimes, if you tell somebody that you love them and they don't feel the same, that's going to hurt. There's no soft landing with that. If you share your truth with somebody and they say, oh my God, like even just that, right? And somebody responded in that way to me one time when I told them something. In fact, I think she might have even said, that's disgusting or something. But there's no soft landing with that. So that might happen at times. I don't think that that would happen in a group experience if you're being led by a facilitator that knows what they're doing, hopefully. But the reality is that sometimes when we jump off that cliff, it doesn't turn out the way that we hope. And in those times, it's important to remind yourself of all the times that you have jumped and it did turn out well. I will come back to the mother wound in a moment. Thank you, Candace, for bringing that up. Jesse, thank you for sharing this. So Jesse says it took, when she joined the first round of Journey to Wholeness, which was Journey to Understanding at the time, took 3 weeks to put my nerves at ease. And I always felt like I shared way too much, but everyone was very supportive. The whole experience was beautiful. So the course was 7 weeks total. It took her a few weeks to really feel like easier, that it was easier to show up inside the group. But she kept at it. And because she kept at it, she was able to get to that space where she was able to share all kinds of stuff, which I think was probably very healing. Thank you, Jessie, for sharing that experience. Thank you, Candace. So Candace shared that she's been in a few groups and retreats, and the retreats are the most powerful experiences of her life. Thank you, Candace, for saying that. The retreats really are, because it is so vulnerable. Again, I'm going to go back to that. The reason that the retreats, or even a group experience, but especially a retreat, is as healing as it is because of having all of those fears, feeling all of that vulnerability, and then being able to do it anyway. Because for the most part, when we feel that fear, when we feel that vulnerability, we just don't do it, right? And in some ways, we'll even say to ourselves, oh, it's a good thing I didn't do that, which isn't often really the reality. But in terms of what kept you safe. But when you feel all that fear and vulnerability, and you put yourself out there in those kinds of ways, again, reasonably, a situation that you can reasonably trust and all of that, when you do it anyway, you get to experience emotionally and physiologically something so completely different than anything you've ever experienced before. And that by itself is a really powerful healing experience. Being able to feel the fear and have a positive experience on the other side of that, maybe one of the most profound healing experiences you've ever had on the other side of that, teaches you, mind, body, and soul, that you're okay, that you're safe, that you can feel vulnerable and it be a good thing. But when you let that fear hold you back, then you repeat that cycle of reinforcing that, okay, I feel the fear, I feel the vulnerability. Nope, I'm going to pull back. Okay, now I feel safe. So you create this ongoing cycle that you've experienced in your entire life of feeling the fear. Nope, I'm going to pull back. And then you can breathe, right? Because you said, nope, I'm not going to do it, no matter what it is. So you pull back and you say, okay, I'm okay now. Now I'm safe. So you train your body over and over, a million times over again, that that's how you stay safe. That when you feel that vulnerability, the only way to stay safe is to pull back. And part of what you have to be able to experience with healing, and this happens in lots of ways, not just a group experience, but part of what you need to be able to experience is feel that fear, do the thing anyway, and then get to recognize you change that loop that happens. Instead of this tight little cyclone thing that happens of feeling the fear, pulling back, then feeling safe, and just that being the pattern. When you feel the fear, you do it anyway, you get more experience, and then you feel the pride, you feel the connection, you feel the love, you feel the support, whatever it is. You're retraining your mind and your body in what it feels like to be vulnerable, which makes it easier. And in fact, in Journey to Wholeness, we talk a lot about vulnerability, and because it is such an important piece of of this whole entire healing experience. Yes, thank you, Barbara, for sharing that. Yes, that you're not alone. So important. So, so, so important. As humans, we need to know that we're not alone. Um, Kelly says, I thought I wasn't capable of being in a group, that I wouldn't be able to cope or to keep up with the conversations. I was so afraid, but it ended up being incredibly healing. Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing that. The specific, let me get this out. The specific things that you just said about that, I think, are things that so many people can relate to. Not capable of being in a group, right? That you wouldn't be able to keep up with conversations. Whether those are the exact words that somebody else might be saying to themselves, I think that that is such a fear, right? For any of you who maybe haven't done a group or have done a group but can connect with that, right? Can I get a raising of the hand there? Because it is, we find the reasons to not put ourselves out there. It's part of our self-protective mechanism. And the really kind of ironic thing about our self-protective mechanism is that while it serves to protect us, it actually in our adult lives doesn't. It keeps us instead from being able to do the things that are so important in healing. But those ideas that I wouldn't, I can't do that, I won't be able to keep up, I won't be able to participate, I won't be able to share, whatever it is, those are the self-protective mechanisms kicking in, reminding you of all the reasons why it's not okay to do that. But the thing about a group experience, at least the way that I run groups, is that it isn't even so much about specifically what you share or how much you share. It's about the energy that you bring and just being in it, even in online stuff. You do participate. And as Kelly ended up sharing here, and Jess, that even though you may struggle ahead of time or in the beginning, you find your voice because you're in this healing experience. And the experience itself gives you the safety and the comfort in finding your own voice. And again, that's why it's such an important aspect. Hi, Katie. Yes, Sean. Scary but worthwhile. Hi, Nisa. I think this is Nisa. Yeah, the vulnerability keeps us from doing so many things in our lives, no matter what our histories are, even for people that have never been abused or had anything really bad happen to them in their lives. Vulnerability keeps us from so many things in our lives. Lisa says, I like that I could process in my own way, in my own time. Was uncomfortable, but allowed me to notice my self-protective mode. Yes. And even being able to recognize what some of those fears are and what those fears are about, really, is part of the healing that happens as well. And being able to recognize that, once you really kind of have an awareness of that, then you can be much more intentional about doing it differently so that you can then either allow or create experiences that help you move through that and begin to heal. So I'm not seeing any comments or anything. on Facebook, so hopefully I'm not missing anything over there. So it was brought up, Candace brought up the mother wound. So one of the things that I am also kind of working on, I did get some interest um, around possibly doing a group on healing the mother wound. And one of the things that I have experienced for myself, but also in the work that I do, is that even for people that don't really have a history of abuse, but especially for people that do, that even if mom was not an abuser, most of us have a lot of healing to do around our relationships with our mothers, whether we had whether we grew up with our mother, whether we didn't, whether our mother knew about the abuse, didn't know about the abuse, somehow was abusive herself, or maybe it looks like you had a pretty good relationship, but find that you still struggle with different things around your relationship with your mom. The mother wound is real. It is very real. Our relationships with our mothers, whether they're in your life or not, even if you were adopted, your relationship with your biological mother as well as your mother that raised you, there's going to be complication in those relationships. And one of the interesting things that happens often is that even if mom didn't specifically abuse you or didn't sexually abuse you, but say somebody very close to you did, even a father, for example, sexually abused you, what often ends up happening is that the complexity of the mother relationship can often create even more, or the relationship with the mother can often create more complex issues when it comes to healing. I would say by far the majority of people that I have worked with, even if mom was not an actual abuser, dealing with mom, the relationship that you had with mom and or continue to have with mom is sometimes the thing that takes the most work in terms of healing. So I asked my Facebook group about interest in possibly doing a mother wound group, and I definitely got some interest. But again, I know that somebody might have some interest, but then when it really comes down to it, like, I don't know about that. So, in addition to Journey to Wholeness again this year, and if anybody is watching this who did Journey to Wholeness in 2018, if I when I launch again this year, if I'm going to have that group component in it, you will be invited to participate in that aspect without having to purchase the entire thing over again. And you can reach out to me. I can reach out to you about what that would look like. But so in addition to doing that, I am going to be working on creating an online course, hopefully group course, if there's enough interest, on healing the mother wound. And it will look probably somewhat similar to what the original Journey to Wholeness kind of looked like in terms of having a series of videos and meditations and that kind of thing, but then coming together as a group as well to process, and lots of Q&A, because again, the Q&A seems to be a really important piece of all of this healing, which makes sense because that's a big part of what group is in general. People being able to share their questions and concerns and getting feedback from the entire group, of course, as well as myself. So that is just in the beginning stages. So that will not be likely being, not be something that I open quickly, but I would love to hear from you. If it feels like something that you would like to do, either as a standalone course, so something that you would just do on your own, um, or that you'd like to participate in a group, um, then I'd love to hear from you. You can share here on the Facebook. You can the Facebook Live. You can share here on YouTube. I would really love to hear from you if that feels like something that you would be interested in experiencing, and something that I would really love to be able to do. So you know that I host the retreats for survivors of abuse, which I would love to be able to do if I have enough interest, because I always make sure that I have enough interest before I put it together, because I want to hear from people that are interested around when are they available. I don't want to set something up and then have the people interested not be able to come because I scheduled it at a time that doesn't work for them. So I like to hear from the people who are really interested in a retreat and then try to schedule based on availability of all of those who are interested. So the other thing that has come up is having a retreat for people around healing the mother wound in particular. And one of the things that I thought about doing and starting kind of from the offset is creating the group and kind of releasing it as part of a group leading into a retreat. So where the intention would be, we would come together, we would do this group work together, which would probably be, again, like somewhere between 6, 8, 10, maybe even 12 weeks. I don't know exactly what that would look like. Where we come together online for the group piece of it, and then have a retreat planned where we would come together at the end. And if with the retreat aspect of it, right now it would have to be women only. Now, if I had enough men that were interested in doing a retreat as well, I would happily try to get a retreat together for men as well. So if you have any questions about that, again, even once this live is over, please feel free to share them in the comments, and I'm happy to come back. And like I said, this isn't something that's completed yet. So if you've got feedback about that, I am very happy to hear your thoughts about it, and maybe even try to incorporate some of that as I consider what this could look like. If you've got questions about the other group, Journey to Wholeness, also feel free to share those here, and I'm happy to answer them. I will also, I'm in the process of redoing my website, so I'm not sure if everything is going to work. Once this video is over, I'm going to go into the description of this video and share a few links that might be helpful for you. So when this video is over, I will share a few links for that. So again, I'm not seeing anything happening on Facebook, so I don't know if it's working properly or not. Let me scroll here. I think I would feel guilty for opening up about mom. Such an important thing. I'm so glad that you said that, Lisa. This in and of itself is part of the healing that we have to do when it comes to our relationships with our moms, or anybody else really for that matter. But when it comes to our relationship with our mom, and when it comes to healing in general. Hi, Cass. And this is something I think that so many people struggle with. I know that I have, for sure. And it's interesting how significant this is. So Lisa says, I think I would feel guilty for opening up about mom. Probably a lot of you can relate to this, right? That thinking, well, I know she did her best. She didn't actually hurt me in some way, or whatever. And there's a couple of reasons for this, which I could do a whole other video one. But I think this is a really valid point, so I do want to address it at least a little bit. Part of the reason that we struggle or feel guilty with kind of talking bad about somebody, especially a parent or possibly even like a sibling or somebody that you have a close relationship with, part of the reason that we struggle with that is because it kind of goes back to the self-protective thing. I mean, obviously, there's just regular guilt, like you're identifying, there's just kind of some guilt there. But part of the reason that we have that guilt is so that we don't talk about that person or talk badly about that person, or let's be real, ultimately what you're doing is just speaking the truth about that person or your relationship with that person. And if there's bad aspects to that, it's because there's something bad about the relationship. Speaking badly about somebody means that you're speaking about them in a way that isn't an accurate representation. If you're speaking the truth about it, then you're just speaking the truth. But the part of the reason that we have difficulty with it is because, especially when it comes to moms, particularly if mom is not an abuser, is that as a way of coping, we have to believe that mom is on our side. We have to believe that mom did the best she could. We have to believe that we can depend on, rely on, count on, believe in that relationship. We need to be able to believe that it's real and that it matters and that it's loving and good and whatever. We need to be able to believe that as a way of coping. Because think about it, if mom didn't protect you, if mom didn't support you, if mom, whatever, just didn't make you feel great, and you're already having to live with the reality that there's a lot of this other bad stuff happening, if you also tried to accept the reality that mom wasn't, that you couldn't depend on mom either, think about it. For a child, I mean, generally you can't actually rely on that person, but in your mind, you tell yourself that you can. Because if you accepted the reality that there was no place that you felt safe, that there was nobody that was protecting you, that there was nobody that you could rely on, that you didn't actually feel love from anywhere, or that you were enough, that would be entirely too much for a child to take on. It's kind of too much for an adult to take on. So as a child, you develop that way of coping, and of course we hold on to that. And an example of this is I had a client whose father abused her. Her mother did not abuse her, but her mother learned about the abuse and didn't really do a whole lot at all. And in our early session, it might have been the first session, it might have been the second session, I think it was the first session, I was asking the client about who in her life does she have that she can go to for support. And her mom was somebody that she identified. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about her history, other than that there had been abuse. And I thought, okay, great. But I had enough experience at that point to just kind of make a note. Okay, I wonder how supportive mom really is. But hoped, at the same time, hoped that really mom was somebody that was incredibly supportive. As time went on, not too much time, but as time went on and we talked more and she shared more, I learned about what had actually happened and that mom knew and didn't really do anything. And so I ended up, and all the while she's still saying that she talks to mom and mom is supportive and all of that. And we ended up talking about it, and it was a really difficult thing for her to accept, but it was important for her to accept. But it was hard for her to accept that in reality, mom was not supportive. Mom was not there for her as a child or as an adult because mom was still with the man that abused her. But in her mind, she needed to hold on to that mom was supportive. She needed at least one parent to be in her corner. And it was incredibly difficult for her to accept that mom, in fact, was not a support for her. It was devastating. But she needed to be able to see that in order to heal it. You cannot heal what you deny is wounded. As long as she kept pretending that mom was supportive, she could never heal the deep hurt and betrayal that she felt from her mom, which was a really, really significant part of the healing that she needed to be able to do. And like Lisa, for her, she felt bad. She felt guilty. She felt, for religious reasons, she felt like a lot of, well, guilt ultimately, I guess, but felt that it was so wrong of her to talk badly about her mom. But it was a really important piece for her to be able to heal fully, because as much as we talked about the abuse and dad and all of that, she was never going to be able to heal it. She wasn't able to acknowledge the depth of betrayal that she felt. And obviously, this might be a very different scenario than a lot of people, but we have to be able to honor how we've been wounded. We have to honor the child within us that was deeply hurt by a mom, by anybody, but in this case, I'm talking about mom specifically, by a mom who didn't know what was happening, or who knew and didn't do anything, who should have known. A mom who, because of her own stuff, didn't have the strength to leave, or who, because of her own stuff, couldn't support you in your dreams the way that you deserve to be supported, who, because of her own unworthiness, felt jealous of your success. There are so many ways that we are wounded in our lives, and not just by mom. But when that wound comes from mom, and obviously if there's abuse by mom, that's like a little more obvious and clear, but a lot of people still deny that. But even if mom did not actually abuse you, there's still so much healing for many, many, many people that needs to happen in order to fully be able to heal. And most of you have heard me share this as well, that I had a client without an abuse history who years ago shared with me that her mom said one time that no matter how good a job you try to do, your kid's always going to end up in therapy talking about you. And I kind of laughed about it because it was true. It's also sad. And I have kids, and I wish anyway, I wish my kids would go to therapy and talk about all the ways that I've messed up and the things that left them feeling not so great or whatever. Because the relationships that we have with our mothers, generally speaking, are the most profound in terms of how we see ourselves. For all of us, no matter what our histories are. And the mother relationship is the most profound in that aspect, generally speaking. Now, even if you have a if you're young and you were raised by a stay-at-home father, it may be a little different for you because, and I say if you're young and were raised by a stay-at-home father, because it's much more acceptable now. And so we have a little bit of a different societal view of that we can be worthy if our mothers are off at work and our fathers are home. So it's a little bit different in that aspect. But for most people, the relationship with mother is the most profound. Even if mother is not in your life, it's going to have an even more profound effect in some ways. It's going to affect you in different ways. The mother-daughter relationship, generally speaking, is the most complicated, the most complex relationships that exist. Now, of course, there's going to be some caveats to that. There's going to be some circumstances where that's not necessarily going to be the case. And again, as society shifts and more moms are not the primary caretaker, responsible person for childcare and all of that, even if you've got a nanny, mom is still typically the one who kind of deals with all of that. As that shifts, that will begin to change in some ways. But that's why it's the mother-child relationship is the most profound. Mother-daughter relationship is the most profound and complex. So most of us are going to have issues with mom. And it's important, again, that idea, you cannot heal what you deny is wounded. You cannot heal what you're unaware is wounded. And that's what I mean by denial in a sense. But being able to recognize that or being able to recognize how that relationship has left a lasting impact that doesn't leave you feeling good about yourself in some way. And maybe it's continuing because typically the patterns we had as children continue into our adult lives with those relationships. It's an important thing to just recognize in that sense. Kaz, I'm so glad that you were able to experience a group that was really profound in your healing. It really is such an important piece for everybody. And this isn't just to try to get people to join my group. A group in your area, I think an in-person group is actually really, really powerful. And it can be hard to find a group. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of them that exist out there, but some communities have quite a few of them. A lot of rape crisis centers will host or facilitate support groups for survivors. So some people in private practice, I did mine both at a rape crisis center and continued into my private practice holding groups. So sometimes private practices will have groups as well. For anybody who is in social media and in a group that is for survivors of abuse, there's a lot of benefit that comes from that, right? Just hearing other people sharing, there's a lot of benefit that happens just in that experience. When it's an actual closed group experience that's facilitated specifically around different topics and stuff like that, you get even far more from it in that aspect. So please, 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 please consider a support group, a closed support group. And what I mean by closed is, so there's open groups and there's closed groups. And what I'm referring to is not like a Facebook group, but an open group is kind of like just an ongoing rotating type of group where people can kind of come and go. So each week or each month or whatever, it might be different people in the group. There people can kind of come, join whenever they want. They can leave whenever they want. That's an open group. A closed group is that it's typically for a set period of time, and it's the same people. So new people aren't joining, people aren't leaving. It's just a closed group for a set period of time. And I think that when it comes to abuse in particular, that's really important because you need to build a sense of safety. And if people are just kind of coming in and out over the period of time, it's going to be a lot harder to do. And kind of an example of this in one of my retreats that I led, somebody ended up joining the retreat after the Facebook group had formed, and it wasn't very long into it, but the Facebook group had formed, and somebody ended up joining into the retreat, and she was really uncertain about joining the retreat because she was afraid that like the group had already kind of formed relationships, and that maybe it would be too late for her to become a participant in that. And fortunately, that wasn't the case because the Facebook group was for people to come together and begin to build those relationships, and it worked out beautifully. But it does matter in terms of that. So I think a closed group is certainly more ideal in that sense. And again, if you've got questions, if you're interested in joining me for a group or a retreat, I would love to have you, and you're welcome to share any comments or questions that you have here. And even afterwards, if you're watching this on replay, try to do hashtag replay so that I know that you're watching it on replay and it's not something I've already answered. And I will come back and try to answer that. And if you feel like you know that you would really like to do a group or a retreat with me, you're also welcome to send me an email. If you have a specific question or concern, reach out to me. You can send an email to healing@courageousjourneys.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about that. And again, I will share some links in the description to point you in a direction to sign up for more information or something like that. So if there are no further questions. Oh, hi, Donna. Hi, Becky. Well, we've been on here about just over an hour. So I'm going to be signing off unless there are any specific questions. But I would love to hear from you. So feel free to share in the comments, questions or comments, either one. So I'm going to give this just a few more seconds to see if anybody has anything. This is totally unrelated. And some of you already know this. I am going to be creating a series of interviews with people, with survivors of abuse or assault, sexual abuse or assault, for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I don't have anything that I can really point you to unless you're on Facebook, but I'll share something about that separate. So if you would be interested in sharing your story in a public way for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, keep an eye out. I'll be sharing something about that as well for you to reach out to me if you're interested in doing that. So thank you, everybody, for joining me on this Friday afternoon. I will look forward to seeing you soon. Make sure to take some time this weekend for some self-care. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.